Hey guys, this is Matt Chieco from Pop Horror Review the Movie Podcast. The Book of Boba Fett has ended, but did it even really begin? Since the series is over, I hope it's the series. I hope it's the mini-series and not a series, because this is a pretty low bar for Star Wars. We're going to talk about the season as a whole. By the way, this is a spoiler alert, so if you don't want to know about Boba Fett, or if you just want to know how it was and you want to watch it. But this is a spoiler alert. So, and I want to start with just like the general thoughts of the Book of Boba Fett, because it wasn't good. To be honest with you, it made me lose all interest in Boba Fett. Like, I feel like that's a trend that's happening, that they're taking these like kind of villains and making them heroes, but in the process kind of taking away what's great about them. I feel like people have been doing that in recent times, like in the last couple of years, and they sort of made him look like a fool. Like, what did he do? He really wasn't fighting anyone. He wasn't doing anything, but like, it wasn't like he was like having these great dialogues of like trying to negotiate peace. Like, he just wasn't doing that. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't doing anything. Fennec Sands, Ming-Na was doing more than he was. The weird biker gang was doing more than he was. The Jabba twins were more interesting than Boba Fett. And this is the Book of Boba Fett, not the Book of place your name in there, please. And I get the whole point, like what their goal was with the show. They were trying to like show how he was a deadly bounty hunter and how he's sort of become a protector. The only thing is they never really showed him being deadly anymore. Like, it was like he kind of, that opening scene where he was getting out of the sand pit monster, like that was great. But after that, like, except for maybe a couple scenes here and there throughout the series, I mean, he wasn't doing anything. There was no story to him. There was really just no story happening. And I think they were trying to make like they were trying to do like the mob genre and trying to put it into Star Wars, like that universe. And they had the tiniest sliver of that. And the rest of it was like, no, we're not trying to do that. I understand where their thought was, but the execution was terrible. And which is surprising because Jon Favreau wrote it. But also, I mean, it wasn't just Jon Favreau who was to fault at this. And I still have faith in him, because those episodes where it was pretty much The Mandalorian 2.5, season 2.5, they were great. And that was him and Dave Filoni. But the worst episodes were Robert Rodriguez. Everything was wrong with it. We got halfway through and I'm like, what is this about? And we got to the last episode. I'm like, what is this about? Like, it was, you're always asking, what is this show about? I feel like they should have, I understand the process what they were trying to go, but it just never was working for me. For me, at least. It was never working for me how they were trying to plot this show out. And like I said, there was no plot. They should have showed him as a deadly bounty hunter in the beginning, and his like kind of like a backstory origin of like what happened after Return of the Jedi, which they had in like the opening scene. And then kind of you see him go to the Tusken Warriors and kind of become this protector. And that was the backstory part of it. Then you go to the present day. So you have the Mandalorian aspects and you have the Tusken Raider aspects of what you've seen already. And you see him trying to rule peacefully. But in a mob movie, that's not always the case. You gotta break a couple break a couple knees. Like, you gotta do a little something. So showing him kind of regressing, like that could have been the thing. You see the backstory. Then he's starting to try to rule peacefully in Tatooine. And then, like, you see him sort of falling back into that deadly kind of, like, bounty hunter. And then it should have been him being like, no, I am doing this like the Tusken Warriors said. Like, the Tusken Raiders. I am doing this peacefully. And then that's when, like, that's when he killed Cad Bane. It would have been so much more satisfying, because you literally see him killing his old self and starting anew. And that's what the series should have been. But instead you got a mishmash of whatever the fuck they were trying to do. And like literally just random characters, didn't care about any of the characters. Then towards the end of the series, you got Mandalorian 2.5, amazing. Boba Fett was not even in it. He cameoed in his own show during that time. Like, literally, like, and then you see people on Twitter, oh my God, it was amazing. I'm like, and then they're hashtagging Book of Boba Fett. I'm like, that wasn't Book of Boba Fett. That was Mandalorian. Just tag Mandalorian. Come on, let's be honest here. I mean, speaking of Cad Bane, I also think he should have came in earlier, and it kind of would have been him and the Pike Syndicates doing this. I feel like that would have been much better, like kind of like hand in hand, like him. They both came in at the same time, and it's more They were from behind, and he was kind of leading the pack, like the fighting. But to be completely honest with you, this whole miniseries, series, whatever you want to call it, could have been in Mandalorian season 3. To be quite honest with you, it could have been a couple episodes where it was like a standalone episode for Boba Fett. Show the backstory of how Boba Fett came from Return of the Jedi to where we are in the Mandalorian. Fill in those missing pieces. Then this whole Pike Syndicate type situation becomes the storyline of the Mandalorian, mixed in what they were kind of doing already in Boba Fett. Like, have those two things kind of meshed together, maybe add an episode or whatever, and he could have been a very large supporting character. I just feel like they took a story that they were going to use as like a B storyline, not the main one, but the side one, and they're like, let's just turn this into a whole show. And like I said, the parts that they had, there was very little parts of like mob like movies in this, and the parts they had were great. Like, the one thing that stands out to me, like, if the whole series was kind of like this scene, it could have been more interesting. It could have, if the scene where he's at the table at his at Jabba's palace and he's talking to all the other crime lords, and literally, like, he's like, stay neutral. That scene, and he's kind of threatening them, but still pretty much doing peacefully. I think that, like, if you would have had more of that, like I said, that the whole plot I said before of how the show should have gone, mixed in with sort of like elements of mob movie, of like a mob series or a mob movie, like the genre, it could have been good. So now it's like, you didn't care about Boba Fett, a huge character in the Star Wars universe. Do you care about him anymore? Do you want to see him more? Like, it's like you kind of wasted a huge character. So I feel like that was the ball was dropped by Star Wars there, or Lucasfilms, really. And so I'm kind of just going to go through each episode really quick and say how I felt about it and what was wrong with it, what was right with it. Mostly going to be wrong, but really quick before I say that, one of the major problems was the two storylines. Literally spend more than half the episode on one and then go back really quickly and then do that at the next episode. So they should have just kind of been like backstory, boom, now we're in the present. And now it's present. Because it was like that weird, like, oh, he's in the bacta tank, we're going to a flashback. It just, the structure of it also felt very not what we've seen so far with The Mandalorian. Like, The Mandalorian, yes, is slow, but it pays off. And it's very episodic. It was like, it just was, they didn't have an idea. Like I said before, they didn't have an idea, so they were really stretching thin. And they're like, oh, let's just kind of put both in both, and whatever we need when we do one. But it did a disservice to both stories. First episode, Chapter 1, A Stranger in a Strange Land. It was fine. It was a good pilot. It was slow, but so is Mando. Season 1 and 2, there are episodes that are slow, but it still has your attention. This had my attention. I was interested. Theme song was great. Like, probably the best part of the whole series is that little opening theme song. It gets stuck in my head all the time. Like I said, the Sarlacc pit scene, great. And then it kind of, was just kind of setting stuff up. And we were like, oh, okay, like, can they do this? At this point, I'm like, can they do these two stories? And a lot of people I've been reading or watching videos about the show, they were kind of saying the same thing. Can this be done successfully? It couldn't. But we were still optimistic at that point. Chapter 2 now, The Tribes of Tatooine. An amazing episode. Really, like, it showed you how he became from Boba Fett in the return after, like, in the original trilogy to who became in Mandalorian season 2 because of the Tusken Raiders. And I thought that was a beautiful, great episode. And there wasn't much dialogue, but it was just like all information that put pieces together and it just explained it more. And I thought the Tusken Raiders were going to be, why do I keep saying Tusken Warriors? I thought the Tusken Raiders were going to be a big part of the show. And then the credits roll on this episode, and we go to episode 3, The Streets of Mos Espa. And this is when it just falls apart. The show falls apart. They kill the Tusken Raiders, which you're like, oh, that one person might come back at the end. Spoiler alert, no. Chapter 3, The Streets of Mos Espa. It was like a Spy Kids episode that they somehow mixed Spy Kids and Star Wars, and they're like, this is going to be good. I like this idea. No, I didn't like this idea. It was bad. Those biker gangs did not fit in the world. And maybe they would have fit in a different planet, but they did not fit in Tatooine, like a very beige color, and they're all brights, pops, and like pops of color. I'm like, this just doesn't work. And then all the action was terrible. That was the slowest fucking chase scene I've ever seen in my life. Like, I was like, is it just me, or is it like there's no stakes? And I went on Twitter, and there were no stakes. And then you like kind of like and then like that's when you realize that I don't think there's really gonna be a villain in the show, because you think it's gonna be the Jabba twins, the Hutt twins. No, then you think it's going to be the Wookiee bounty hunter. I'm sorry, I don't want to pronounce his name wrong. No, they kind of just, at that point, they let him go. Everything's just kind of like all the plot points that you thought they're going to like take and then go with it, like The Mandalorian does. They kind of do slow and then they take all those things and kind of mix them together. Everything was kind of going their own way. And you're like, oh, what? There was like a Rancor, but then they kind of got rid of him. This episode was terrible. This was the worst episode of the series. And I think just Robert, I mean, I know a lot of people have been saying this, but Robert Rodriguez did the first, second, and last episode. And those are some of the worst. And maybe just Robert Rodriguez is like a Ryan Johnson. Me personally, I didn't like Ryan Johnson's take on The Last Jedi. Maybe he's just one of those people that cannot do Star Wars. There's just certain universes that you can have your artistic output, but sometimes it still needs to be done within the world. And sometimes people push it further and it just doesn't work. So I think this is what happened with Robert Rodriguez, and they'd be kind of stupid to bring him back. No offense to him. I like him in other things. It's just this world was not for him. Then you have chapter 4, and what was it called? The Gathering Storm. And this was more about like this was like an okay, like the first half I hated. The second half was good because you kind of saw that kind of Boba Fett being Boba Fett, just like fucking tearing down those biker gangs just on his ship and stuff like that. But then the first half, you pretty much are just retelling everything we know from Mandalorian. You know, Fennec Shan and him get together. You know, she has those like that like mechanical armor that they kind of convert her into like half like an android. You know, he gets his ship back. So why are we all doing this? We know the answer to all these questions. It's not interesting. There's no stakes. Like, why are we doing it? And then once he gets his ship, it kind of diverts off of that and does kind of fill in those blanks again with where he was in between Return of the Jedi and Mandalorian. But just that last half. The first half literally was telling you things that you already know. We don't need to like get baby fed this stuff. We're smart enough that we already know about that. And then there's chapter 5. Whoo, baby. I remember I turned it on and it said The Return of the Mandalorian. And I was like, oh, this is going to be good. Like, Mandalorian's back. Pedro Pascal's back. It's going to be great. Then I realized at the end of the episode, this was Mandalorian season 2.5. Boba Fett was not in it for 1 second. And this is his show, but he was not in it. And this was my favorite episode of the series because, and I'll tell you why, it was just done so, I think because you were getting all this like bleh from Book of Boba Fett, and then you're like, here's like in one episode, a concise story. You know where Mandalorian season 3 is going, and it was good action. It had great storytelling. The visuals were great, and it was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. That was amazing. When I saw that, I was like, she needs to be in the Star Wars universe forever. She just needs to, wherever you're doing stuff, give her a trilogy, give her a show to direct. She is a very good director for this universe. It was just, it was just kind of, it just had a different feel. And I don't know why that was, but it was just amazing. And then like the Darksaber, and it pretty much was the Mandalorian story continuing from season 2 to season 3, and you like kind of the middle part of like what you need to know before season 3 starts, because then they can jump right into it. And I just thought it was amazing. I thought everything about it was really, really good. The only thing that pisses me off, it's like when your best episode doesn't have the main title character for 1 second, not even a millisecond. That's bad. That's not great. It's like they were like, oh no, they kind of realized that they're like, we kind of just stretched this too thin. Okay, we need to stop doing Mandalorian episode, and then we'll come back and do Boba Fett at the end, which then leads into episode number 6, another Mandalorian. Season 2.5. From a desert comes a stranger. And literally this episode specifically was like, this could have been a Mandalorian season 3 episode with all these characters coming back. You have Cobb Vanth, great. You have Cad Bane, and like that's like, because Cad Bane, I understand what they're trying to do with him, but he could, if this is what your purpose was for Boba Fett, it should have been much earlier instead of the second to last episode. You had Luke Skywalker, you had Grogu, Baby Yoda. Oh my god, those scenes were amazing. You had Ahsoka, you had the Mandalorian again, and all, you had, like, it was so, like, that was so good, but the worst parts when they bring you back to Boba Fett's story, and he has a cameo, not any lines, just a cameo, and it's like, that's why episode 6 is a little less, even though episode 6 is amazing, and like 5 and 6 are like great Star Wars television, I think because they take you out of that story and put you back in the Boba Fett one, you're like, I don't want to be here. And like I was like, just go back, so you get taken out of it. So that's the only reason why I would think that's why episode 5 is kind of higher than episode 6, but both are great episodes. And there was like the parallels from the old trilogy in the 6th episode with Luke, and the special effects were even better than they were in the end of season 2 when he was there. It was so good. Like I can't like that. These 2 episodes made me so excited for the future of Star Wars television on Disney Plus. Then we go to episode 7, the season finale, hopefully series finale. In the Name of Honor. Oh, by the way, Cad Bane in live act. I saw the anime. I'm not familiar with the animated universe of Star Wars, but I googled him and I'm like, they brought him to live action very well. So now back to episode 7, In the Name of Honor, the longest episode at an hour, and there were some great. I think the story, since there was no story, it wrapped up nothing. This episode was kind of just like, oh, we're here to kind of like wrap up a story, but really we don't have a story, so we're just gonna fill a bunch of action. And there was great action scenes, like the scene where they kind of jetpack out of the destroyed bar, the destroyed tavern, I think it was, or the sanctuary. Like that was great, and they're fighting. Just the two of them is very westerny. It was great. The action was great. The slow mo was amazing. But then it's like we have to fill another 55 minutes. They were like, let's just drag out these action scenes and have a lot of dialogue in between. Like they're like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna? The plan scenes, like what's our plan? They had so many of those, and those fucking robots just kept walking. I'm like, this is just like, once again, there's no stakes. And like in the episode when all the crime bosses kind of like attack them before the robots come, and before the Pike Syndicate kind of like attacks them, like the final attack, they all kind of corner each of the groups that came throughout the series. So the biker gang, Boba Fett's warriors, the green like pig guys. Sorry, I'm sorry if I'm forgetting their names. Don't hate me. So they're attacking all those groups that they made, but like you don't feel for any of them. And like except for the Wookiee bounty hunter, I was like, oh, I like him. So that's the only reason that's the only person I kind of felt bad for. But they killed those kind of like those like warriors at Jabba's palace, and I'm like. And then they were doing like things to the biker gangs, and I'm like, I don't care about you didn't spend enough time with these characters to do it, to like feel for them. And then there's like these weird action moves where they're doing spinning stuff, and I'm like, and it's with the fucking biker gang. Why have the biker gangs? It makes no sense. Episode 7, it wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst because they had good action scenes. And once again, Mando and Grogu were in it, and it kind of progresses their story towards season 3, so it just makes you more excited. But at the end, they're one big, like all Boba's like kind of like workers or minions or where he kind of gathered throughout the series. They're like, we did it. And he's like, we're ruling peacefully. And then that's how it ends. And I'm like, this didn't wrap up anything, which is why the episode wasn't great. It felt like a middle episode, really. It felt like an episode where it's like, okay, you have like 1 or 2 more after. It was so weird. It wasn't great, but the action saved it because some of the action was really good. They just went on way too long. I'm excited for more Star Wars television, but like they really need to look at this show and see all the things they did wrong, because there was a lot. Because if you got to learn from your mistakes, and if they don't, we're in trouble. But if they do, I still have faith in John Favreau and Dave Filoni, but I just hope that Lucasfilms also realizes their mistakes with the show. These are my favorite episodes from worst to best. We're going to start from worst. The worst episode was episode 3, like I said. Just terrible. It was no stakes. The action was terrible, boring. It was supposed to be an action episode, and the action was terrible, so it did not help. My second least favorite, number 6, is the first episode, because I almost had this above my next one, but then I changed it just because it was kind of slow. And I know like Mando is like that, but this one ended up not paying off. So like in retrospect, I put it lower. And then you have like kind of like the pacing issue with the 2 stories. So yeah. So, my number 5 is episode 7, the finale. The reason why it's kind of in the middle is just because the action was good, but everything else kind of was like because it didn't really wrap up anything. Episode 4, number 4, and that is because the first half literally was just a retelling of what happened in Mandalorian season 1 and 2. Number 3 is episode 2. That was a great origin-esque story, and they should have taken that and really ran with it, but they kind of stopped dead in their tracks and was like, that's all you need, right? We don't need any of that. We can go back to this main story. That should have been like the main element of the origin stuff, and like either expand the backstory or kind of bring them into the present, but they killed them all randomly. So in episode 3, they just randomly killed every single one of them, so you really can't do that. Number 2 is episode 6, like I said, amazing episode, but Boba Fett was in it, so I couldn't love it as much as I loved my number 1 episode, which is episode 5. It was great, the story was great, the visuals were great, the directing was great, the acting was great. It was the story. It was like, oh, this is good, and this is what I'm looking for, and like it just set up Mandalorian season 3, which I was so excited for now. And then you don't have Boba Fett, which is also why I'm like, oh, this is good. because you don't have to like get taken out because of that story that you're not interested in. I think I almost want to put 5 and 6 tied, but just because Boba Fett, that storyline kind of comes back into episode 6, I just can't, because episode 5 was like perfect because it didn't have anything taking you out or distracting you from anything. So yeah, that was my review of Book of Boba Fett. I don't know how you feel. Put it down in the comments below if you liked it, if you hated it. If you're excited for Mandalorian Season 3 like I am. I think we got Moon Knight next, so that's the next Disney Plus show. Let's hope it's nothing like Book of Boba Fett. But I'm excited for Season 3. Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, don't let us down. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Check out our YouTube page. Cheers.